Hi, welcome back to Via Hafta TV. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and we're very happy to have you watch our show once again. I was thinking prior to this show, the best way of introducing it, and I was because it's a very special show. Sitting next to me is my mother. and Mom, I was thinking to try to come up with some great interviews throughout history where a son interviewed his mother, and quite frankly, I couldn't come up with one. So, if you, the viewer, has any ideas, please let me know, and we'll add it on to the next show. But really, the central motif of today's show is speaking to you, Mom, about the Tikkun Olam, repairing the world that you were involved in throughout your life, and what you taught to me and my sisters, and ultimately what we've taught to our family. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You look lovely.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner, but every Tuesday I have lectures all day long. So I couldn't come because I would never have gotten here in time. But thank you for having me.
Hence your erudite personality.
All right, thank you so much.
And let me say publicly, thank you so much for giving birth to me and bringing me into this world.
Oh, that was the best.
So Mom, I thought, it might be very interesting to approach this interview according to the chronology of your life, because your life has been very interesting. As they say, you should live till 120.
Thank you.
But you were born in 1930 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and that was sort of the beginning, or perhaps even in the middle of some very, very difficult years in our world. And I remember, my Zadie and Bubby, your parents, how loving and how beautiful they were.
They were.
And it occurred to me that early on you had no choice, your family, but to be part of the world. It's not like today where everybody, their family, it's one family in a home. I was walking around my apartment last night and I was thinking to myself, my God, look how much space I have. But you were brought up in a time where I think you said there were like 16 people in your home. 15.
The 16th person got married that summer, my aunt. But 15 people lived in our house on Oxford Street.
So right. it occurred to me that early on you must have learned how to get along with so many people, right?
Well, I did. You know what? We all did what we had to. And until a certain age, I slept in the same room with my brothers.
Yes.
And then my father thought, well, no, this isn't nice anymore. So I got into my own room. But till then, I slept with my brothers. And it was, this is how we got along. And for 15 people, we had one bathroom.
Wow.
To share, yes.
How did it go?
There were uncles and aunts, and my mother and father had 3 children, so we were part of the 15. And my grandparents, yes, who there was no way we would ask them to leave the house, guys. They were part of our household, my grandfather and my grandmother. And they lived in the house, and uncles and aunts that weren't married lived in the house. And my mother and grandmother were basically the cook for everybody.
Yeah.
They were so I learned at a young age that everybody shares and gives. And my mother did. She worked very, very hard. I can remember that all the time.
Yeah, I remember the story that you told us when we were growing up is how at 4 years old you would walk your younger brother, Meyer, in the carriage. Tell us that story. That
is hysterical. I was 4 years old and I was a babysitter. A built-in babysitter. My older brother was 6 years older than me, and he was at school. But I was still home. At that time, we didn't go to nurseries or day schools or daycares like today. We were home till 5 years old when we started school. And my mother had just had this baby, and she was busy in the house cooking and looking after my grandparents and everybody. So every day my mother would put the baby in the buggy and tell me to take him out and walk him. So I would walk him, and I was beginning to resent it because my friends didn't have to do this. I don't know if there wasn't another baby in their houses, right. But I would walk him up and down Oxford Street. That's the street that we lived. Walk him up and down and go to the corner and then try to play with my friends. And one day I said to myself, I've had it. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I left him there at the corner at Weinstein's Grocery. And I walked around the corner with my friends to play and so on. And then when I came back around the corner, I still left him there and went home. I was getting hungry. It was lunchtime, and my mother screamed like she spoke only Yiddish.
What did she say? Say it in Yiddish.
In Yiddish, "Wie ist Kind? Where's the baby?" Like, "Wie ist Kind?" She was frantic. I said, "Oh, Mama, I left him in the carriage." I said in Yiddish also, I left him in the carriage around the corner by Weinstein Grocery. She screamed, "Das gelostes Kind by the grocery." She ran out screaming. She ran up the street. She was, today you'd be in a tizzy, wouldn't you? You'd be in a tizzy like that. And you know what? I was tired of doing this all the time. And she went and she got him. He was there. Mr. and Mrs. Weinstein looked at him from time to time in the buggy.
And he was okay. He was okay.
He was fine. So, and my mother wheeled him home.
You know what occurred to me, Ma, too, is that
It was so hysterical.
you know what I was thinking about too is that having so many people in the house,
right?
That you probably developed a certain respect for your Bubby and Zadie.
Very much.
Which I don't know that we have today, because so often what happens is Bubbies and Zadies end up in homes for the aged. But there they were.
Not them.
No, not in those days. That's my point.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. And even when my Bubby got sick, Bubby is Jewish for grandmother. When Bubby got sick, my mother looked after her.
Yeah.
She wouldn't let her go anywhere.
Yeah.
And even like with my little brother, you think after that incident I got let off, that I didn't have to look after him anymore. No way. I still had to look after him after that.
Yeah.
And you know what? There were other people in the house, so you would think, well, why couldn't they maybe do that? But my uncles were working.
Like it was a different time.
It was a different time. My uncles were working. My aunt was working. And my other uncle and aunt that lived there, he was working also. So there was no, and my older brother, he was at school all day.
Right.
So there was just me. It was hysterical.
So again, we're talking about Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world. Today I'm interviewing my mother, Rebbetzin Gitel Rosensweig, and there's a lot to tell. There's a lot to tell. Because,
Thank you.
Because after you left your home, when you got a little bit older, you moved to Kitchener, and you became a Rebbetzin. And you didn't by choice. Well, it was a choice to marry the man that you loved, who happened to be a rabbi. But along with that came huge responsibilities. So we're going to a break, but when we come back, we will continue this discussion with my mother, Gitel Rosensweig, and take you really into the world of a Rebbetzin in a smaller city and what their responsibilities are. So stay with us. You're watching via Hafta TV, taking you into the world of empathy with my mom. Welcome back to Via Hafta TV. I'm very honored today to be interviewing my mother, and how many people have that opportunity. I'm very honored to be your son, Ma, and to have learned so much from you and from Dad, who passed away in 1989. You really did teach me and my sisters a lot about Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world. Maybe not verbally, but I think through osmosis. We're going to touch on our lives in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada in a few minutes. But before we do, I'd like to lay the groundwork more so for your education having to do with chesed, which is kindness and giving and caring. There are a few interesting points that you brought up prior to the interview having to do with how you learned about, taking care of others. One which was very interesting was you worked since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, right? Mm-hmm. And you didn't keep the money. You didn't pocket it, right?
No. I didn't.
Where did the money go?
Most of it went to my mother and my father.
Yeah.
Because my father, for a few years, had a hard time getting a job. Depression years, when the Depression years were over, there was the war. So my father, it was very difficult for him to find a job. And when he did, the money went to look after a family and food and clothing. So I got a job every summer from the time I was 11 years old, delivering groceries. And then I worked, maybe you guys still know of it, Blue Ribbon Tea and Coffee. I worked one summer. That is not a job anybody should have. You came home smelling from salt and onion, salt and pepper.
You
and
smell like a
everything.
salad, yeah.
Yeah. And so I worked there. Every summer I worked, and I gave most of the money in to my mother and father. I kept some, like for spending. Also, I put aside some money that I would have to buy clothes when I went back to school and books and so on. But most of it like went into the household.
Would your mother have just accepted the money from you? Was it a given?
They thought
would
that
she have
it was
thanked
the
you
right...
for the money, or was it just
sure.
understood?
Yeah, they thought I was the best kid in the world.
Did they?
Yeah, my mother and father adored me. They did.
You had a tremendous consciousness, too, about the war years and even your responsibility as a child. You told me over the years about speeches that you used to make in your high school.
Yes.
And having to do with the war, right?
When I was at high school, Central High School Commerce, Collegiate, so every year I entered the oratorical contest because I liked oratory and I felt that I was prolific in it. And so every year I'd speak and every year I won. And I chose, I'll tell you very briefly why, I chose to talk about the war, even though I was a young kid, 14, 15 years old, 16. I chose to talk about the war, and I wrote all the speeches on my own. And my teachers, who were not Jewish, none of them were, they were very impressed that I could speak on such a caliber about war where we weren't even in there. But in one of them, I explained in one of my oratorical speeches how we were partly in there, because although my grandfather brought everybody over from Europe, one son of his and daughter-in-law and 2 children were left there.
It's Moshe and his family.
Uncle Moshe and Auntie Chaya, 2 children. And at the time they were ready to leave, before the war started, September 1st, 1939, they wouldn't let him go because he had a limp foot. He had polio as a child. So they wouldn't let him go. They said she could go and he couldn't, she and the children. And she wouldn't leave him. And they sent them back. September 1st, 1939, the war broke out. Even though I was a kid, I still remember. And they took them all out in front of the house, those lousy Germans, and shot them. Shot them in front of the house, and then took out my father's parents and his sisters and another sister who had 7 children in front of the house and shot them. Should I not speak about those things even though I was a very young girl? I mean, this was family that was in Europe that were shot and killed right in front of their homes. And then my grandmother, when she heard about Uncle Moshe and Auntie Chai and the children, my grandmother took to her bed.
Yes.
And you want to hear Tikkun Olam? Nobody takes care of their parents the way my mother took care of her mother. My mother took such care of her, she wouldn't let her go into a home. She watched over her, took care of her, washed her, fed her and everything. And my grandfather, like, it was devastating for him. And my mother did that all the time, and I saw that growing up, how my mother looked after my grandmother.
We try so hard to protect our children from such diversity, but yet there was no way to protect you as a child from that.
How could I be protected? I lived in the house. And my booby loved me. I used to go over and sit on her bed.
Would she talk to you while she was in bed?
Yeah.
Do you remember would she sing to you at all?
She'd say, sing to me, and in Yiddish she'd talk to me. And
what would she sing? Do you remember?
What she'd sing to me?
Do you remember? Yeah.
Oh, that song that I still sing to Yechiel and all my grit. You want me to sing
Yechiel,
it?
your grand. Yeah, sing it, please.
All right. Schluf my Fegele, mach zu deine Gale, I lu. Schluf mein Teierkind, schluffen Zeigesin, I lu.
And what would that translate to be?
Schluf my Fegele, go to sleep, my sweetheart, my little one. Schluf mein Teierkind, my blessed, lovely child. Schluffen Zeigesin, sleep and be healthy and well always.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's a picture.
I still sing it to Yechiel.
To your grandson, my nephew.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful song. I know there's a picture in your study at home, which is of you as a little girl and your brother and your cousin Fishy.
Right.
Again, collecting money for the Warriors. How old were you in that picture?
In that picture, I was 11 maybe.
And I think it was one of the major newspapers in Toronto took that.
It was the Toronto Star. And my brother, Meyer, was 4 years younger than me, and Fishy was only 6. That was my little cousin, but he was like our brother. And I said, you know what? we got the Toronto Star and it told about the bombing in Britain. And look, I was just a young kid, and I said, "Look, guys, we've got to do something about that." My mother said, "Was wirst du tun?" I said, "Mama, I'm going out from house to house. I'm going to collect comic books." So I took Uncle Meyer and Fishy with me. We went from house to house, collected comic books from everybody, went over to, you won't believe this, today would I have the nerve to do that? I went over to the bank at the corner of Spadina and College.
Yes.
It was a TD Bank, and I went in there, and I said, I don't know how I had the nerve. I said, "Is it all right if we put our little cart," it was an orange crate that I got, "outside your bank, because we are collecting money to send for the bombed out people in Britain."
I'm sorry to cut in, but we have to go to a break. How much money did you collect?
Oh, about $1,200.
Did you really that much?
At that time, yes. We stood out there for weeks and weeks and weeks. Every day we would go there with comic books, stand there in front of the bank. People always came. They gave, what, 12 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents if somebody was really... to buy a comic book.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, but certain historians credit you for the end of the war.
Oh.
Folks, we're going to a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue a discussion with my mother about her days in Kitchener, Ontario.
Excuse me for interrupting. Could you believe that I had the nerve to go in to ask the bank if we could stand there at that corner with this orange crate?
This is my mother, who has a lot of nerve, as you can see. Stay with us. You're watching via Hafta TV, and we're taking you into the world of empathy with a very nervy Rebbetzin Gitel Rosensweig. Welcome back to Via Hafta TV. My name is Avrum Rosensweig. I'm here with my mother. I would like to ask you, please, to go to Via Hafta's website and take a look at what we do. I think it's some pretty special work, both locally, nationally, that's in Canada and around the world. You can find our website at www.viahafta.org, and that's VEAHAVTA. We have a blog. We're on Facebook. And we would ask you please to be in touch if you have any questions about our work. And essentially, we're Canada's only humanitarian organization, which I think is impressive.
Very.
You impressed, Mom?
Very impressed.
Thank you.
Yes.
We in the last segment, we talked about your growing up years, and which I think really was a platform for your education having to do with Tikkun Olam and learning about the world in which you live. And it was a very difficult education, because you happened to be born in those years where 1918 was the end of the First World War, 1939 was the beginning of the Second, the Depression, and they were tough years. I mean, your father, my grandfather, my Zaidi, Moshe Chaim, he was an accomplished singer. I understood he studied under Kusovitsky in Poland, right?
Yeah,
but he came here and he worked in a slipper factory for 40 years.
He also sang with Yossele Rosenblatt, who was the world's leading cantor.
Right,
My father.
Right. I meant Rosenblatt. That's correct. So difficult years. I mean, a lot of people were doing stuff that they weren't necessarily comfortable with, but they did what they had to do.
And what if you couldn't get a job, darling?
I know.
You couldn't get a job. He used to go from street to street to look for a job just to make a living.
To take care of
the family. And when he got a job, he used to work the whole week at a machine, because he was very good at that. I was proud of him. And he worked in this factory, and Friday came, and they said, "Mr. Flicht, don't forget to come in tomorrow."
Which was Saturday,
and
Shabbat.
He said, "It's our Shabbat." Can I say it in Jewish?
Shabbos,
Shabbat. Yeah, a Shabbos. It was our Shabbat. And I can't come in tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, then don't bother coming back on Monday morning, Mr. Flicht." Out my father went again, Monday morning, going from street to street looking for a job.
I'm overwhelmed by what your family and so many other families went to, but let's move on. I think we've established that time in your history quite well. But
I never thought I was poor.
Yeah, that's an
I never
interesting
thought I
perspective.
was poor.
Yeah.
I know people ask me, didn't you think you were poor? No, I didn't think I was
Yeah.
poor. We had a roof over our heads,
3
so
square
even though there
meals.
were 15 people, 3 square meals, my mother was the world's greatest cook in the world. You would have
She
loved
taught you
her
to make
food.
borscht and chicken soup very
Oh
well.
yeah,
I know.
not just that, everything else. She was amazing.
But let's move on here, Ma, because there's so much more to tell. In 1953, you got married
Yes.
to my father, Feivel Rosensweig, who died in 1989. You were married
Right.
for 37 years?
36.
36 years. And you became a Rebbitzin. I wrote an article once about you and Rebbitzins, and essentially the motif of that article was that, you know, men study to become rabbis and eventually get their certification, which is called smicha, but women become Rebbitzin by virtue of the fact that they love a particular man. You didn't have to study for it. You didn't have to learn for it. It wasn't a chosen career. Yet, it really was a career, wasn't it? I mean,
Yes.
you worked hard. You worked hard. You had huge responsibilities. 23, 24 years old to take care of a community, right?
I was 22 when I was married.
Right.
And then
And then you came to Kitchener, Ontario, which is 1 hour from Toronto. And all of a sudden, you were the first lady. How
That's
was
right.
that? What was that like?
being the first lady was, I didn't care to be a first lady.
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy to make your father happy because he was a wonderful rabbi. He was an amazing orator like you are.
Yes.
And he was such a good man. So I just wanted to make him happy.
Yes.
And the fact that I was going to have a role to play, I didn't really realize it until I got there. Until I got there.
How did you realize it? What did you realize?
I suddenly realized that we're going to be entertaining,
Yes.
having people in the house, that I was going to be the first lady of the sisterhood. Do you know what a sisterhood is? In a synagogue, they have churches, I think they also have sisterhoods.
Yes.
So I was the first lady of the sisterhood. I was also top brass in Hadassah, that I had to be part of all these things, being a rebetzin. And then Dad also said, well, maybe I should teach part-time. You know, like teach Hebrew
Get you out of
school
the house.
part-time. Get me something to do. You know, teach part-time. So I did, and I saw that this also was quite, you know, like all these kids and everything, because before that in Toronto, I worked in a business office.
Yes.
Okay, so here suddenly I knew, because I knew Hebrew and I knew all the things connected with it, but I had never been trained as a teacher, but suddenly...
Here you were. But here's the kicker. By 1960, you had 5 bambinos, me being the 5th, right?
5 children under the age of 5.5.
And here's the big piece. Dad introduced you to a brand new culture, which was opening our home up to the world.
That was real tikkun olam.
That was real tikkun olam. And by that I mean, Dad would bring people home into our house, and they would stay with us for a day, for a week, for a month, for a year, for 2 years.
2 years.
And I've always said in articles and on this show that I think you were the real hero in that story. I really
Thank
do.
you.
I really do, because it was upon you to take care of those people with 5 little kids in our home in Kitchener on Lydia Street, which was not a mansion. We had no air conditioning. I went back to visit a little while ago, and it was tough. So we're going to hold back your comments because we're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we're going to pick up on this because I want to hear from you. I've spoken about this far and wide, about what we did in our family when we were younger, but mostly it was you. So please stay with us on Via Hafta TV. We are taking you into the world of empathy with my mother, Gitel Rosensweig. Before the break, we were talking about our time in Kitchener, particularly the early years when Dad would bring home...
I'm emotional not because of that, but because of you spoke so nicely about what I did, and I never asked for any...
Yeah, so let's pick up on that. Let's stay with this.
I never asked for any...
Let's stay with this. So Dad brought home what some people would call stray dogs. Inappropriate phrase, but these were people who had very difficult lives. There was one woman that Dad brought home that had some sort of surgery and was in a body cast. What was that all about?
Darling, she wasn't a woman. She was a 15-year-old girl.
Yes.
Her family had discarded her because she was a Jewish girl from a Jewish family, but her mother had remarried, and the man she married didn't want Patricia in the home. So she started to run around with not very nice people, ended up in the girls' penitentiary in Preston. And that is where we found her, in there. And Dad's tried to get somebody to take her in, people who didn't have children. Maybe you'll take her in, give her a home. She was a pleasant-looking girl. She was only 15. So when they heard, one or two people who didn't have children said maybe they'll take her, but when they heard that she had been in the girls' penitentiary, forget it. It ended up no one would take her, so I ended up taking her. And then when I took her, I was going into my 9th month with Rabbi. That was my second child. My first child was about 16 months old, Etty. I was in 9th month with, and Patricia all of a sudden developed terrible back pains. I took her to a specialist. I remember Dr. Mustard. He was world famous for that type of surgery she needed. And he said that she'd have to be in a cast, front and back, for at least 15 months.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, 15 months, and I'd have to take care of her at home. We moved out of our apartment into a house, so she'd have her own room. And he said, and you're going to have to carry her up and down the steps, Mrs. Rosensweig. Dr. Mustard, he was very nice. I mean, I said, Dr. Mustard, I'm in my 9th month. I'm expecting a baby. I used to carry her up and down the steps, carry her literally with that cast on. Then I got an instructor to teach her so that she could have lessons at home because she was missing out on school, grade 10, grade 11. And she lived with us. The cast came off in about 15 months. She lived with us like almost 2 years.
Are you happy you did that stuff? Do you
I
feel
wasn't
fulfilled?
always happy then because I remember before she had the cast on, I don't know why I think of this, we bought her nice clothes that would fit her, and that she'd feel like a nice girl. Maybe a nice boy would take her out or something. And then she went into a store downtown in Kitchener, went in and said, the rabbi said that I could come in here and buy these clothes. And she went and she bought these clothes and charged it to us. And she came home. I said, where did you get these clothes, Patricia? And she told me, Mr. Summer's store. I says, you're going to take them right back now. She says, no, I'm not. I said, yes, you are.
Yeah.
March downtown.
Did you take her by her ear?
Not really. I dragged her.
That was
I
reserved
said, you
for me.
take
No,
it
I'm just
out
kidding.
outside, and you take that right back there. You are not going to keep those things. We buy you clothes. You do not go into a store.
So it's an interesting thing because you were doing all this chesed, this kindness, this tikkun olam work, but you certainly didn't do it because you were appreciated by the person you were doing it for, right?
No.
No?
No.
And now when you look back on it, Mom, do you feel a sense of purpose because you did it? Do you feel like, wow, I brought something very special into that girl's life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we introduced her to a nice young man also. After she got the cast off and she could live a little, we introduced her to a very nice young man. And we thought she'll have a life. But his mother wouldn't let her son have anything to do with her.
We had Kathy and Debbie stayed with us. That was a mother and daughter.
Oh, that's also.
How long were they with?
About a year and a half.
A year and a half.
A mother and a daughter.
How did
we
they
didn't even know she had a daughter, Dave. We knew she came to us through the university. And she came and she stayed with us for a while. Then she told us that she had a child, Debbie. And what could she do? What could I do with her? So she moved in with Debbie into our house.
Where did Dad find Kathy and Debbie?
At University of Waterloo in the Hillel,
Right,
which
right.
he had started. which he had started.
You know, I'll tell you something from my perspective. I don't know if you know this or not, but I felt that our life was much richer because all these people were coming in and out of our house. It certainly was, it was never boring. It was never boring.
Boring. I wouldn't say it was boring. How could it be boring?
Yeah, it wasn't boring. No, no. And
what did you have to do?
not too much. But every single Shabbat that I can remember, there were people around our table. And in fact, I remember that people would sometimes sleep in my bed.
And you slept underneath the dining room table.
I slept underneath the dining room table.
That's right.
Now, do you think that was a good idea, or do you think I should have stayed in my bed?
I think you should have stayed in your bed, and he should have slept
under the dining room table. Yeah.
And look at all those guys from university, and Danny and his wife who came to us every Shabbos.
Do you remember when Shlomo Carlebach was at our house?
Yes.
That was really something.
And also Meyer Kahane.
Meyer Kahane, yes, yes.
They were
and this was in
special.
Kitchener, which was 250 families, Jewish families in our shul, right? It's not as though we were a huge cosmopolitan Jewish community.
No, not like Toronto.
But you and Dad made things happen. You really did.
All the time.
Yeah.
And you know what? Talking of bedrooms, when you and Layla were little kids, and Patricia was with us then, so you and Layla were in one bedroom, and you were in a crib. Layla was in the other bed. Etty, Chavi, Naomi, and Kathy and Debbie slept in that one room. I put together 3 beds, and they went all of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to my mother. This is Rebbetzin Gitel Rosensweig. That was a good exhale, Mother. And we're talking about Tikkun Olam, and I think you personify that Jewish value very, very well, Mother.
Thank
you.
you.
It's a pleasure for me to listen to this, and I know it's going to be a big deal for our family and friends and colleagues to listen to this as well, because you speak gems when it comes to this topic and this subject, and you know what you're talking about because you did it. So stay with us, because when we come back, we will continue this very rich conversation with my mother having to do with Tikkun Olam and taking you into the world of empathy on V'Ahavta TV. Welcome back to V'Ahavta TV. When you have a chance, take a look at our website at v'ahavta.org and concentrate particularly on one program which we have, which is called the Street Academy. And that's a school that we started up about 2 years ago for the homeless here in Toronto in partnership with George Brown College. And it's really magnificent. We just started our summer semester, and of course Teresa Schrader, who was formerly homeless, is now an employee of V'Ahavta, and she is running the Street Academy. It's very unique, and we're looking forward to building that throughout the nation and perhaps internationally as well. We're speaking with my mother today about Tikkun Olam, and we really have concentrated on some of the fine, fine work that you've done, Mud, to make this world a better place. Now, sometimes people come to you, and you have a responsibility, I guess, to make their lives better. I once heard from a rabbi who said, listen, you don't have to go out to the world to find things to do, but those things that come to you, you should respond to them, and you should try to fix them. And believe me, he said, there will be enough work through that alone. But there was another type of Tikkun Olam work that you did, which was sending your children away to Toronto, again, 1 hour away from Kitchener, to go to a Jewish school. Now, as a mother of 5, doing that every year, every time one of us would turn 13, sending them off to Toronto, until finally, for all intents and purposes, I guess by 1973, when I went away, you were 43 years old, you were an empty nester.
That's right.
It must have been very difficult.
I missed all of you very much. I was used to, some people say, it's, oh, who wants to have all these kids around and so on, but I loved having all of you around all the time.
But why did you do it? Why did you send away 5 kids?
Very simple, because they would have started to go, I have nothing against the high schools. The schools in Kitchener were wonderful. Very good, excellent education. The teachers even said that my kids were the best kids that they had.
Of course.
They went, Mr., the principal of the school and so on. And I loved the schools. They were all wonderful. We even used to have some of the teachers for Shabbos, even though they weren't Jewish. We invited them. But suddenly I was faced with the fact that they have to have a Jewish education. There was only secular, after public school and Hebrew school, there was only secular education in Kitchener. They had to go to a school where they would get, where all of you would get an advanced Hebrew education and be with other kids, like religious kids. I have nothing against the kids. Again, I love the kids in Kitchener. An example's Brad Strauss, who still loves us to this day. And all these kids grew up in their house. They'd come to our house. But I wanted and I needed my kids to meet religious kids.
So what was it like?
I wanted my girls to meet boys that they could marry, and you to meet a girl that you could marry. So I had to send them to Toronto. And the only way I could send them was to send them to a school where they would be there the whole week. They couldn't go back and forth. It was impossible. What, would they take a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to Toronto and drive back again? And
so Mom, my eldest sister is Etty. You sent her off. She was 14, actually.
Right.
Do you remember when you sent her off the very first time to Toronto?
Yes.
What was that like?
It was very hard.
I can't imagine.
It was very hard. And we were all very close and everything. And it was hard for her also.
And then the second year you sent Javi off?
Javi was 13. I sent Javi off. And then the third year, after I sent Naomi, at first they lived in homes with people. Like we paid certain fees and they stayed at home. Then the people said they love the children, but they can't keep more than 2 children. 3 children was, and Naomi was ready to go also. So we rented an apartment. I said, like, kids, are you able to stay in an apartment? I used to worry about them. We called them every day, Dad and I. Our phone bills were astronomical.
So you had a 13, a 14, and a 16-year-old in an apartment.
Yes.
Then Layla came to Toronto, I guess, in
year.
1972.
Yeah.
And there were the 4 of them. Etty was probably 17 by then.
Yes. And then the next year when you were going to go,
73.
At least I knew in the yeshiva that you would have a dormitory.
Yes.
The school that they went to, the religious school, I don't know why. To this day, I don't know why they don't have a dormitory for girls. You were responsible to find a place for them to live. But Avrum went to yeshiva, and they had a dormitory, so you had a place to live.
So, Mom, you had 4 girls in an apartment on Bathurst Street, which is the main Jewish corridor.
Right.
And, again, you were an empty nester. People just don't do that. I mean, you don't hear about that too much.
Avrum, I got all their meals ready for the whole week so that when they went back Sunday night or Monday morning, when Dad drove them back, I had meals ready for them the whole week. All they had to do was warm it up when they got home.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to worry about that. I made them sandwiches for almost the whole week also, so they'd have lunches. And our phone bill went
through the roof.
Through the roof. Through the roof. I remember a guy calling us from Bell Telephone saying, "Do you run a business?" I said, "No, we do not. Our children are away studying in Toronto, and you should respect that and not raise our phone bill to the heights you raised them."
What was the quiet like?
I didn't want it to be quiet anymore, Avrum, so I took a job on at the school. Do you remember I started to teach Talmud Torah?
Yes, yes.
Because I had that training from the initial years, so I went back to teach, so that I wouldn't have to face that quietness.
Are you happy with the decision you made to send us to Toronto?
After I was so lonely, but I thought Dad was wonderful too. Every Friday he would drive, and my husband would drive into Toronto every Friday to bring them home for Shabbat. Every Friday. But then he brought tons of kids with him also.
This is a really, I mean, to me, it's a really unusual story because I think I think this is a story.
Weren't you lonesome being away from home?
Oh yeah, of course. I left home when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very difficult.
Yes.
I guess we could say that we all understood the higher cause, why we did it, and of course, I grew up in Toronto from that point, and I gained a lot through that. So, would I do that with my son? Probably not. Probably not. But I respect you and Dad for having made that decision and living with it. Because, I mean, that's Tikkun Olam at its finest. We so often hear of stories of people in other countries sending their children off for a better life. But here you were in Kitchener, and you decided in order for your kids to have the best Jewish life possible, that's what you needed to do. So I know you want to respond to that, and I'd love you to, but we have to go to a break. And when we come back, we're going to go to our final segment, and it's going to be a real open segment just to discuss your feelings and thoughts about your life in the context of Tikkun Olam, Ad Mea Ve'esrim, until 120, as they say. So stay with us, please. You're watching V'Ahavta TV, and we're taking you into the world of empathy with my mother, Rebbetzin Gitel Rosensweig.
This is very emotional.
It is very emotional, Ma.
It is.
This is my mother, if you haven't met her yet. Before the break, I asked you about your decision to send my sisters and I to Toronto when each one of us would turn 13 years old. What is your answer to that? Was it a good idea?
It was a very good idea. And Dad wanted it also, but I was amazed because I loved the kids. I loved having them around after school. I was amazed that I went for it, and I thought it was a good idea because deep down in my heart, I wanted when the time came that they would meet good boys in Toronto, boys like our family, and that you would meet a girl like in our family. And that was, aside from the education, I wanted them to marry guys like they were. And my feelings were justified because they all met wonderful boys there. They would not have met them in Toronto. They would not have met... Or in Kitchener. Or in Kitchener, yeah. I mean. They would not have met them in Kitchener, excuse me.
Because these guys were from, they were living religious lifestyles?
They were all from, all religious guys. They went to yeshiva. And look at, you brought home Meir, who married my daughter, Leila.
Yeah, he was a friend of mine in yeshiva.
Yeah, from yeshiva. And Chavi met David, and Eti met Jack, and Naomi met Benji. Where would they have met these guys?
So Mom, looking back on your life so far, you're very spry. You haven't stopped doing Tikkun Olam work. As an example, some tremendous letters to the editors that you write, or the letter to the Queen.
I just got an answer from her recently.
Well, you were encouraging her to visit Israel, right?
Yes, I thought she should visit Israel.
What was her answer?
She wanted to, but she has this guy who plans her trips for her.
And he has her going where, to the Bahamas first or something?
Strange place.
No, but good for you for writing those. And I have to tell you something. It's always been inspiring to me, and I'm sure my sisters as well. But my question to you is, looking back on the last 82 years, and you have a bunch of years to go, do you look at it and say, oh, Gitel, good job. You know, you've made this world a better place. You did as much as you possibly could, or do you say to yourself, could have worked harder, I could have done more? How do you look at your life?
I look at my life that the Ribbono Shel Olam, that God inspired me to do what I did. And sometimes it was very hard, but now that I look back, I think I did the right thing. Mm-hmm. And above it all, I thank God for my children. Mm-hmm. I thank God for my children, and that I was blessed with such a wonderful family. And even though I had to do certain things or other things, but in that came the blessing of my wonderful children, my daughters and you, my sons-in-law. I don't know if my son told you how many grandchildren I have and how many great-grandchildren. And I'm young. I just feel that I was blessed a lot.
You know, I've always told people that I think everyone has a standard that they set in life, and that's their strength, and they work toward it. And we can't always meet everybody else's standard, but at least we know that humankind has it within them to do great things. Like Romeo Dallaire, the general who was in Rwanda. Not too many people are going to be as brave as he was, but at least we know that human beings can get to that level of courage. With you, the level of standard, your standard, which you set, which very few people, I believe, can meet, is what we call in Hebrew, Rodef Shalom, which is running after peace. And you do it magnificently. I
That's
don't.
what I do.
I don't think there's anyone in the world right now who you have, as they say in Yiddish, broigus with, because you've gone out of your way to fix it.
That's right. I wouldn't be mad or broigus with anybody.
I know.
If I am, I'd fight to make peace with them.
So wonderful stories. You had a family member who, we'll just simply say, was not the kindest human being.
That's right.
Lived in your house. And when this individual passed away, you insisted that you go to his funeral, and you insisted that your two brothers go as well. And they didn't want to, right?
No. No. But I said, I'm never going to see him again. He's never going to ask anything of me. And I feel that I should go just to pay him a last honor.
What compels you to run after peace in the way that you do?
I guess it's just that I love people, and I always did. And I know that my mother and father just adored me. You know what? And running after peace was, I liked all my friends when I was growing up. I didn't have fights with anybody. You know what? I got along with my brothers. I just liked being with people.
Yeah.
I always said I'm a people person. Mm-hmm. But when I started to have my kids, boy, that was the best.
Yeah.
Having my kids, some people complain, you know, they work too hard and so on. I just was so proud when I would go out with my kids. I'd stand there, and sometimes in shul, you were standing with Naomi or Layla, and I'd say, oh, are those my kids? They're so gorgeous. These are my kids. And then when they started to get married, all of them, the wonderful families they had, and my grandchildren, you know what? Like when they took me to dance at the wedding, one of my grandkids just got married recently, Dave. And when the boys all took Sholem, Meir, Shruggy, all of them took me, and Yechiel, everyone took me to dance with me. I said, these are my boys and my girls. You know what?
You couldn't ask for more than that.
No.
So, Mother dear, here's what we're going to do.
I just love them. What can I tell you? I just love all of them.
We're going to wrap up the show. And what I'd like you to do is to take us out of the show with one of your favorite Yiddish songs. Will you do that? So think of a song as I take us out of the show.
Not Lulinka My Fagel again.
No, another song. Maybe a Sukala, a Kleina or something. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on V'Ahavta TV. I was deeply honored. It was a very big kavod, as they say, to interview my mother, Rebbetzin Gitel Rosensweig. I think it's safe to say that there are many people out there whose lives have been made infinitely better because of the work that you've done. So, yeshar koach to you on your commitment to life.
Thank you.
And you should have that until 120.
I hope I can continue to do it always.
You've been watching V'Ahavta TV. We've been taking you into the world of empathy with Rebbetzin Gitel Rosensweig, who will take us out of the show with her favorite Yiddish song.
My favorite. Oh, one of the favorite ones that Yechiel likes also. Eufen Pripitschuk brennt a fire und in Stub ist heiß und der Rebbe lernen kleine Kinder lach dem Aleph Beis.